Hello. All right, let's talk about Herman Melville's story, Benito Cerrito. Cereno, I hope I'm saying it right. Cereno. Benito Cereno. It's the name of a man. Oh, by the way, this is a total spoiler. I'm going to review a story that I read, and then I'll tell every detail that I can think of. So don't watch this if you don't want to have the story spoiled for you. But here we go. So I ran across this story in this Penguin Classics compilation of a few Herman Melville stories. I particularly bought this book for Billy Budd Sailor that I wanted to read. And Benito Cereno, which I have a hard time saying, occupies about an eighth of the book. It's not that long. It goes, how many pages is it? It's one of the longer short stories in the book. It goes from page 55 to 138. So what is that, about 80 pages or so. And here's the tale. Very interesting tale. Imagine yourself on a sealer ship in the 19th century, in the Atlantic, on the island, stopped at the island of Santa Maria. And I actually looked up Santa Maria in Google Maps in the Atlantic. It doesn't seem like, when first I pictured this as an island that would have like a coral reef around it, and that the boat would be in the calm, still waters of the reef, and it's not the case. It's more like an island like you would have here in Southern California, like Catalina Island or Santa Maria Island. We have our own Santa Maria Island. And you would just find a nice kind of a quiet anchorage on maybe the lee side of the island. But this island is way out in the Atlantic. And there's a sealer called the Gentleman's Delight, no, the Bachelor's Delight. And it's anchored there, I guess in the area of the island where it would be the best place to anchor. And they're doing this because they're getting water. So the sailors are going back and forth to the island to get water. While they're there, entering the harbor area comes another ship. Very strange that it's not flying its colors. And it comes and it's kind of drifting. It's clear it's kind of drifting. So the captain of the Benito Cereno, the captain of the Bachelor's Delight, decides that he's going to go out, and his name is Amasa Delano. And I struggled throughout this book to remember both captains' names. So there's one captain is Benito Cereno. He's the captain of the ship that mysteriously kind of drifted into the harbor, half sailing, half drifting. And then Amasa Delano, he's of Duxbury, Massachusetts, and he's the captain of the other ship. Clearly something's wrong with the ship that's just arrived. So Amasa Delano gets his whaleboat out and has his men row him over. And when he gets on board the other ship, he discovers that it's a ship in a state. Now, this is the 19th century, that when this book was written. It's the 19th century that it's speaking of. No, it's actually not. It's the cusp of it. It's the year 1799. This is the time of slavery. This is the time of the Atlantic slave trade. So this is a ship, the ship that is drifted in is a slaver. And I believe it had several hundred slaves on it that were being shipped along with cargo. And a term that I actually learned some time ago, but I remembered it came up here, supercargo, which would be passengers, are also on it, including the owner of the slaves, were on this ship making its voyage from Africa to the Americas. But this ship is clearly, as Captain Delano gets on from the other ship, from the Bachelor's Delight, gets on, he can tell something's clearly amiss. He notices a lot of strange things. It's almost like you'd almost like want to kind of describe it like the set of a play. It's kind of the feeling that it had with, there were, for example, a group of, and I'll just use the word blacks because that's what they're called. They're blacks, you can't call them African Americans. They're not even in America yet. So these are black Africans and slaves, captured slaves. And there's some of them lined up in a row of older men, and they're grinding hatchets. It's kind of mysterious. Imagine like 4 or 5 older men like grinding wheels. Imagine how that would feel, right? Grinding, these are slaves, right? Grinding hatchets, and there's free blacks just wandering all around, right? Just milling about down in the hold. There's women, which they call it, and they used one of the words in Herman Melville. And if I did say so, this is by Herman Melville. I think I did. Herman Melville uses the words Negroes and Negresses to describe the black men and the black women. There are numerous negresses with their children of various ages, naked. The children are naked and running around. He describes how in one case there's like a little upended boat on the deck, and the women and children have made like a little house underneath. I guess you just stay where you can. It's not all blacks. There are a handful of white sailors as well, including the captain of the ship, the aforementioned Benito Cereno, the man who is the object of the name of the story. Who is the name of the story? He's there too. Now he is kind of a strange character, kind of an invalid, young man. Very, the captain Delano can tell he's clearly of aristocratic family, probably of one of the famous. I think he said famous like a Spanish family. He's a Spaniard. He's got the kind of the chiseled look. Young man though. He wonders. The captain of the other ship kind of wonders how he got into this captaincy, right? Did he earn it, or was it just by his family connections? But he's a very strange young man, and he's attended by a rather smallish black man named Babo, I think it is. I can't quite remember. And I struggle with the names in this one. Babo never leaves the other captain's side, the captain of the stricken ship's side, and he's a very good attendant. Looks after everything. But this captain is very strange. He speaks strangely. He has these fainting fits. He just seems to be. He doesn't pay attention. He's just in bad shape. So what unfolds now over the course of 50 pages or so is basically, I think this all takes place in the span of like 12 hours, like from morning until evening, when the two captains are it's like a play. The first setting is they're interviewing one another. They're meeting upon the deck as the captain of the other ship gets on board, and then he sends his sealer back off. He immediately dispatches. He assesses the situation, sees the distress, and sends the other ship back to his boat to get water and some provisions. He's a very generous man, the captain of the first ship. So now he's left alone on this ship. And like I said, there's Negroes and Negresses everywhere. It's a slaver. The slaves are running free. A few handful of sailors. The sailors look ragged and disheveled. The captain then relates in these various settings, like from the deck of the ship up to the command center up above. They make a recess into the hold, up into the captain's chamber. They go to some place that was like an attic-like place, very strange place, where they've been cleared of all the accoutrements, and the captain of the stricken ship tells the story. And the story is basically one of going through a tremendous gale rounding Cape Horn. So I guess they came around from the other side of Africa. Tremendous gale that had basically washed a good number of the crew overboard, left the ship in tatters, and then after that they were becalmed for months, where they ran out of food and are nearly out of water, and one calamity after another just happened until they left them in the state that they're in, with a broken ship with less crew than they need to actually run the ship correctly, and the blacks are basically free reign of the ship. Now it's chaos. And the blacks are fine. The blacks are, given that they're slaves, you would expect maybe there would be more, I don't know, liberties taken by way of their freedom, maybe making efforts to I don't know, control the ship or something like that. But they're very good. I mean, they seem to listen to there's just a handful of white sailors, and they don't seem like they're in good shape, but they seem to maintain their command, especially the captain. Oh, and there's this one really strange slave, who, very huge, giant man, who would appear every 2 hours before the captain in chains, thinking the slave was in chains, to ask the captain's pardon. Well, he was brought to the captain, expected to ask the captain's pardon, and he would never ask it. Apparently this man had been a chief back in Africa, and had, for some reason, had earned his way into chains, and the captain wanted him to apologize for something, and he never did. So he would just, every 2 hours, he would come up and do that, and he would send back. So as the story goes on, and as the two captains continue their ongoing dialogue, and they keep changing settings, this very big black man would show up from time to time. So add to this, you see, you've got the blacks that are the grinding at the wheel, at the hatchets. Apparently, the hatchets were part of the cargo of the ship, and they're being ground in order to prevent them from rusting. So that's why it's just ongoing; it never ends. So you've got the noise of them grinding on the hatches, and then there's the oakum pickers, another group of, I think, 5 or 6 black men, old, hoary-headed men with the salt and pepper beards and heads. And the oakum pickers, it's kind of like taking the old hemp ropes and taking out the rotted strands and using it. They use it for some reason, and they call that the oakum. So you've got the grinders, the oakum pickers. You've got the naked children that are running around, the negresses, the women that are kind of off stage. So again, picture it it's like a play with all this going on. Now, what's happening in the course of these various conversations between the two captains is that the captain from the other ship can never quite get a straight story from Benito Cereno about the state of the ship, and his stories fall down when they'll move from one setting to another, and then the other captain will ask the first one about for more details about, for example, about what happened in the gale, and when the terrible gale that ruined the ship. And then the captain will say something that was contradictory. It doesn't match. This is the problem that happens with liars, right? When they can't maintain the details of their lie, and those that question them uncover that, and that raises suspicion. So that's the first thing that raises the other captain's suspicion. A few other things happen. His suspicion is that all is not as it seems. Something's amiss here. Another thing that catches his suspicion is the looks that he got, the fleeting glances from some of the other white sailors. Also, he notices the looks that he spots between the Captain Cereno, Benito Cereno, and one of the sailors, and fleeting looks between some of the blacks and the captain himself. It's almost as if he's thinking, something's going on here. There's a conspiracy afoot. And he's beginning to think that these may be pirates of a sort, that maybe he and his ship and his crew are in danger. Although he can't quite square that with the fact that clearly this man, this sailor, this Benito Cereno, is a man of good breeding, good education. He's not the pirate sort, and he's such a weak fellow. He's so his spirit is broken. His body is worn and haggard. What's going on here? So it goes on and on. Change the setting one after another. Now, as this is happening, the other boat is making its way back. The ship that they're on, the broken ship, has begun to drift out into the ocean again. The winds have changed. Remember, it's not under control. But he would like, the captain of the first ship would like to get that. It's kind of a point of pride. He wants to help, and he's promised Captain Cereno sails, and that he would give him some of his crew that they could help them to sail this broken ship to Lima, Peru, where they could be refitted. So he wants to get the ship close to his ship so that they can lay anchor together, and he can help to refit this ship, provision it with water that can go back and forth to the island, because they lost all the boats. They don't. The other ship doesn't have long boats, except that one that I told you that's upside down, but it's not seaworthy. So that they could. He wants to get it there. It's a point of pride. He wants to pilot that ship side by side with his ship, so that he can, the Bachelor's Delight, so that he can help to get that in good working order. He's going to give it his best officer, or 3, and they'll let them go and they'll meet up someday in the future. But the ship is drifting out to sea. Now the other boat has made its way in the course of all this. His boat that he sent back for the water and the food has made its way and is slowly coming back. And it's getting close, and he can see it coming close. Now he's changing settings again. And still more incidents happen. He notices an incident where, for example, he's up on I think it's the poop deck, and he notices an incident where a white sailor somehow does something that kind of accidentally hurts, or like trips up 2 of the black slaves down on the deck, and they get into a fight, and the blacks, they take a knife out and they cut the sailor on his face, and the captain expects immediate recourse to that, right? Nothing happens. There's no payment. The other captain, Captain Cereno, notices this, but he just lets it go. He says they're having their sport, and the captain of the first ship, he says, I'm confusing that with a slightly different incident. But he just notices that there's no punishment for that. That's strange as well. The blacks get away with that. Now remember, the blacks are slaves, right? This is 1799. They're on a slave ship. You would imagine that there would be some hierarchy, some law and order, so to speak. Whether or not that law and order is just remains another question. About this time, the longboat, the whaleboat, makes it back, and it's full of water and food. And at this point, Babo, I think that's his name. I keep forgetting. Babo, the slave who is the one that's helping the captain, he takes charge in the captain of the first ship. He wants to make sure that the provisions are doled out correctly, and a system is set up, and it is. I remember the captain Amman. Remember, this is again the time. Captain Amaso Delano wants the food to be, the white sailors to be handled first, and then the blacks, something like that. But the other captain, Serrano, wants to make sure that everybody is treated equally. And so he makes sure that everything is doled out. He doesn't even want to have anything saved for himself. But Babo, his black, what do you call him, manservant, makes sure all this happens, but then he sets aside a special bit for his captain. And then the whaler is sent back to the other ship for more water or something, or to tell them to get ready sails, etc., to give them news, and then he's going to try to pilot then this ship back. So it's again drifting away. Let me get myself positioned again. Now we're in this situation where the captain Amaso Delano is now alone on the ship. He doesn't want any of his men to stay with him. He's with this other captain, Benito Cereno, who's clearly out of sorts, on a ship that is, I don't want to use the word overrun, but I guess it is, because the slaves typically are not in their hold as they should be. Again, no value judgment here. This is a horror to me. The whole slavery thing is a horror to me. This plays that, and that's important. Herman Melville wrote this story to address the issue of slavery. So it's important, if our emotions are being tugged and our thoughts of justice are being tugged or pulled right or wrong, or right one way or another at this point. That's exactly what Herman Melville wants. The slaves have the run of the ship. It's a sense of danger. The captain is wondering if he's being set up, if he's going to get his ship close to his own. Will he come to regret that? Are these pirates? And then Captain Benito Cereno asks, remember, Babo is right there all the time, and there's these whispers between them. He whispers in his master's ear, and then he asks Amasa Delano some very pointed questions. Do you have weapons on your ship? How many weapons do you have? How many men are on your ship? Are all the men on your ship? These very questions that would just make you think, oh my gosh, my fears about them being pirates and wanting to ambush me are absolutely true. But then Captain Amasa Delano is thinking, why would he ask these questions? These are so they play his hand. It can't be that he's a pirate. This would be stupid. You would want to find this information out by other means. Anyway, his trust doesn't falter. He continues to make his effort, and he works his effort to get he takes mild control of the ship. He has some command sent up to have some sails put up, and he manages to get the ship back. The wind comes, and he manages to get the ship back on its way towards his ship. Now, finally, there's one more scene that I want to remember. There's lots of interesting scenes in here, but there's one more scene that I want to share with you that I thought was interesting. And this takes place down in that one room called the cuddy, which formerly had been the room for the officers, but the officers had all been swept overboard in the gale. And here's a description of the cuddy. I'll read it to you. I highlighted it. The place called the cuddy was a light deck cabin formed by the poop, a sort of attic to the large cabin below. Part of it had formerly been the quarters of the officers, but since their death all the partitionings had been thrown down, and the whole interior converted into one spacious and airy marine hall. For absence of fine furniture and picturesque disarray, of odd appurtenances. This is a new word that I had to look up. I can't even say it. Appurtenances, which is an interesting word. It means furnishings appropriate to the interest of the person that lives there. So if you imagine, for example, a hunter in a hunting lodge is going to have guns and trophies all around them. A sportsman will have their trophies, their literal trophies in football things or whatever. So in this case, for our appurtenances would be, the bits and pieces of the seaman's life. Maybe nautical compasses, bits of rope, etc., etc. So imagine this room that had once been the officer's cabin. Partitions there. The partitions are thrown down, and it's very open space, but it's got bits and pieces of nautical furnishings. Somewhat answering. So for absence of fine furniture and picturesque disarray of odd appurtenances, somewhat answering to the wide, cluttered hall of some eccentric bachelor squire in the country. So imagine some bachelor in the countryside that's got a room just chock full of all the little knickknacks of whatever interest he has. I can just see that. Who hangs his shooting jacket and tobacco pouch on deer antlers, and keeps his fishing rods, tongs, and walking sticks in the same corner. So just imagine that. So that's in the room that this next scene takes place. And this is the shaving scene. Apparently every day at a particular time, Benito Cereno is shaved by Babo. And there's this very tense scene. And Babo invites the other captain to come down to the cuddy to be there, so that the two captains can keep up their conversation. But there's this very, very tense scene where Babo is going to shave the captain, Benito Cereno. And he lays him out, lathers it all up, and gets out the knife and strops it. I think he strops it on his skin. So he strops it on his arm, on the hairless part of the arm here. And you can picture the razor blade going back and forth, getting it ultra sharp. And he talks about his black, oily skin being used as a strap in place of a strap of leather, right? And then he proceeds to shave the captain. And you can see the captain is very nervous, although apparently this happens every day. And Babo has never dropped an ounce of blood until today. And he nicks his master, and the blood flows. Now, there's a lot of tension. This is one of those scenes that it's worth reading the book just to get that scene. I mean, it's palatable, the tension. There's something going on here. There's some dynamic between these two that's not coming forth. This is not your normal master and slave relationship. There's something there. And you wonder, is Benito Cereno going to blow up? Well, what was going to happen here? And indeed, after the shaving is done, and the captain, Amaso Delano, he's going up across the ship. Out comes Babbo, running down with a streak of blood streaming from his face. Apparently, Captain Amaso Delano, Captain Benito Cereno, as soon as the other captain had left, had taken the knife and cut Babbo's face. So you wonder, oh my gosh, what kind of volatile human being is this Captain Cereno? What is this? So now it just adds to the tension. What's going on? What's this relationship? What's this dynamic happening here? Now things come to an end. And like I said, this would make a great play, because you could tell this whole story on artificial. If you were to produce this on an artificial ship on the stage, right? Just have the ship across with the poop and the deck and the slaves and the hatchet grinders and the oakum pickers and the various men around and the boat coming up. About this time, and the captain, Amasa Delano, who's so unsure, he's watching. Now he's not so sure. He's watching. He's getting the ship closer. The wind has come up. He's a gentle wind. He's getting it closer to his own ship, and he can see the whaleboat coming back. And finally, they get it pretty close, the two ships pretty close. And they're in a good position, and the whaleboat comes up, and he's decided he's had enough. This other captain, is not grateful for his efforts. He's not grateful for his offer of help. He seems disinterested. He seems crazy, basically. And he's decided that the final effrontery was that he had offered, he painted this picture to the other captain, that once we get our two ships within snug distance of one another, safely anchored for the night, I would like you to come over and have dinner with me. And the captain's like, no, I couldn't. Benito Cereno says, no, there's no way I cannot come. He doesn't say it even in a polite way. It's just, there's no way I can come. He says, no, but it'll be easy. Don't worry about how you're feeling. It'll be as easy as just stepping across from one ship to another. There'll be a little bit of a distance between them because they have to not bang into one another. And he basically throws the captain's offer in his face. No, I cannot come. I cannot come. And this is the final straw that really, it's interesting how propriety was the final straw, not the sense of danger. And Amasa Delano decides, I've had enough of this man. I will do what I can to help him, but I'm going to offer my courtesy no more. This is no gentleman. And as his whaleboat comes up to the side, he begins to step down, and he steps into the whaleboat, and it begins to pull away. And as it does so, suddenly Benito Cereno, who's standing on the ship, leaps over the rail and drops down into the whaleboat. At that moment, bedlam, just all hell breaks loose on the distressed ship, and Babbo jumps over the, including blacks are jumping from the side into the water, and the sailors are trying to beat them off. They're definitely trying to take it over. And Babbo jumps over the side as well and lands in the boat, and begins to fight. Now Amaso Delano, the captain of the first ship, thinks that Babbo is coming after him, because he thinks what's happening now is that this is it. This is the ambush. These are pirates. They are trying to take over, and Benito Cereno is the leader, and Babbo is his faithful servant, and they're together. They're taking us over. They are pirates. But he notices as he's fighting Babbo off, that Babbo's a small man. He does manage to liberate the one knife from his hand, but he suddenly discovers he has another knife that he had secreted away. He realizes that Babbo is not trying to kill him, but he's trying to kill Benito Cereno. So something is wrong here. What the hell is going on? Why would he be doing that? Why would he be trying to kill his co-conspirator in all this? I can't quite remember how this happens, but they win. The the men in the little boat overpower. Oh, I remember how they push off from the ship, and they start stroking like crazy, and they're pulling away, and the slaves that former slaves, I almost gave it away, the slaves that were in the water, they pull away from them, and they're on their way. Now they do have weapons on their ship, and they get away, and the ship drifts away. The blacks that were in the water somehow get into the ship, and it's drifting away. It's not really under sail because it does have some sails up, but it's going away. And Benito Cereno and Captain Delano managed to get on the ship. Now it's all confusion. Now when they get to his ship, the Bachelor's Delight, the reality sets in. The reality is that Benito Cereno was a hostage, that the ship had been overtaken by the black slaves, and mutinied, basically, of a sort. Would you call it mutiny? This is where the troubling part comes in, the part where you have to think about the right and wrong and the meaning of freedom, etc. They had taken over. They had killed much of the crew, and in the process, and had taken control of the ship, and they had demanded Benito Cereno to guide the ship. They wanted to go to Senegal, back to Africa, and they demanded that they take them there. Now the ship had in fact been damaged, although I can't quite remember why. Was it due to the storm? I can't remember. But they were making headway, and they would hope that they would not run into anybody else. So running into the Bachelor's Delight was something that they had not anticipated, that they didn't want, but they were low on provisions, and they were welcome for this. Now Babo was the leader of it all. His lieutenant was that large black man that I told you in chains, and the rest were basically along for the ride. Now the ship is drifting away. The two captains, and the one captain is really weak and has lost his will. But captain, they decide, he's begging them, no, just let the ship go, just let the ship go. But Amasa Delano wants to go and take that ship, and a group of his sailors, I think 5 or 8 men, led by one man who himself had probably been a pirate, decide to get in the whaleboat and go after them, armed, etc., back after the boat. And they do capture the other ship. And they do then, now there's 2 ships, and they decide that they're going to escort that ship to Lima. They put Babo and the other leaders of the conspiracy in the hold of the Bachelor's Delight, and they take them to Lima, where there's a trial. And Babo is the book ends after the story describes the ending. They get to Peru. There's what's written as a deposition. It's the transcript of the deposition of the trial, where the captain Benito Cereno describes the circumstances that happened. Other people are witnesses as well, but mostly Benito Cereno. Babo and the other leaders are convicted of piracy, and don't know if they were hung, but Babo was gibbeted, which is a very common form of execution for pirates, putting them into like an iron cage, usually after death. But I think in Babo's case, he was put in alive. Sometimes they would put the pirates in alive. Look it up. You can see there's a famous drawing of Captain Cook and his gibbet, all locked in. Imagine and they would hang at the harbor so the ships could come by. They could see the gibbeted pirates, just laying, like imagine trapped in like a bird cage that you can't move. And they would just die of exposure, and then they would be left in there for weeks and months until their clothes and bones and body rotted away. It was a message to other sailors to not become pirates. That's how Babo ends. Babo, interestingly, never says a word. It's from the moment he's captured, he gives up. He's, like I said, he's a slight, small man. He knows that he's overwhelmed in the boat. He remains in the hold. The Captain Benito Cereno, is utterly terrified of him. Can't even look him in the eyes in the courtroom. Faints at the sight of Babo. He's utterly terrified of Babo. Babo never puts up protest, never tries to defend himself, is gibbeted, is dead, and that's the end of Babo. That's how the story ends. Now, the story doesn't end there, because it leaves us with moldering questions. Now, I'm a man of the 20th century. with some chance to live further into the 21st century. I'm not a man that was, this story was written in the 19th century. Herman Melville wrote this at a time to poke at the question of slavery. Now, I'm kind of getting backwards here. The reason I'm saying this is this story disturbed me. It unsettled me. I found myself jumping back and forth between, feeling for Benito Cereno and the sailors who had been overtaken by the slave revolt and were in an awful state, being treated very terribly. In fact, many of it lists, he describes, Benito Cereno describes in the deposition how, the other men, the other officers, they didn't die in the storm. They were killed by Babo and the others, and some of them in pretty bad ways. Nothing terrible. They were slightly tortured. The women wanted to torture these guys, that says something too. Imagine what these guys must have been doing to the slave women, that the women wanted to torture them. The women would say, "It's not enough to kill them. Let's torture them first." So just that speaks to that, and I think that Melville was communicating that in that way, that the affront, the injustice that were not just slavery itself, but the abuses, especially that the female slaves felt or experienced. So how am I doing? So there's that. So the whole slavery question is brought to bear. Now, what I'm saying is that here I am, a man of 150 years out from slavery, when I was born, that I found myself pulled between the two. It wasn't much of a pull. I won immediately. If I was feeling initially, when I realized that this was a slave revolt, that it was a revolt, a mutiny, I felt for Captain Benito Cereno and the sailors. And then I immediately thought, well, wait a minute. These are the blacks, the Africans, trying to free themselves. They've been taking slaves. These are slaves, right? Go for it. Do everything you can. The first principle of a slave should be to take every chance you can to free yourself and take as many with you as you can to freedom. Go slaves. I was rooting for the slaves then at that point. And really in the book, there's nowhere in there that I saw anything that Babo did that wouldn't, in a way, be kind of considered reasonable. Clearly, Bob was very intelligent. No, he's the ringleader. Even the way that he killed some of the sailors, it was understood in a way he needed the other sailors' cooperation if he was going to deliver the cargo, so to speak. Although I wouldn't call them that at the point. The passengers, because they had been liberated. They were no longer cargo, right? They had freed themselves. Deliver the passengers back to Africa. So he needed to do that. And so then now you're stuck between the two. You're wondering about and then you get to the trial, and these guys, and Babo and the others are being tried for the white man's laws, the slavers' laws, but yet what he had violated, the mutiny, the etc., was something that would be a natural consequence. It would be a human expectation to do that. The injustice of trying him and punishing him and gibbeting him, no less, for that, just really played in my mind. It still wrestles in my mind right now. But Herman Melville succeeded in writing a story that plants the struggle and the question and the challenge of the issue of slavery, a decided issue in my time, an issue at question in his time, in the mind, back and forth, at odds. For this reason, some critics do consider Benito Cereno to be perhaps Herman Melville's greatest story, for that reason. And I imagine that the question will play out in my mind from this point forward, and it'll always be there. And it'll always be a shining example of how to ask the question of the justice and injustice of slavery, and how to consider that in the light of what would have been the norms of the time. Very good book, highly recommended read. It's not really a book, it's a short story. Well worth the effort, not just for the beautiful writing and storytelling, but for the moral question that it asks, and I believe it attempts to answer. Thanks for joining me. Take care. Remember, let's read.